And welcome back to my channel if you're new here. My name is Rusty. And just welcome. This is my channel where I talk about my favorite movies, mostly horror, and my favorite music, mostly metal. And tonight, I'm going to try not to go an hour. Every once in a while, I'll get carried away. So we are going to talk tonight about A Cure for Wellness. I love this movie. I was lucky enough to grab it. I've got this slipcase. A Cure for Wellness was released in 2016. Directed by Gore Verbinski. Written by Justin Hayth and Gore Verbinski. It stars Dane DeHaan. Yum, yum, yum. I have such a crush. And Mia Goth. And Jason Isaacs. Yes, it is. It's one of Mia Goth's earlier ones. So yes, A Cure for Wellness from 2016. The movie starts out with a guy having a heart attack in a business office. We then see our protagonist, Lockhart, being called up to, he got the job that guy died. So he's called into the boardroom where they inform him that the merger of their big business is in danger because the CEO has went off to a Swiss wellness center in the Swiss Alps, and they want him to go retrieve him and bring him back. And if he doesn't, then they will give them the cops the information that they have over his head because he's one of them. We know you can be one of us because you're a dirty little crook and we've caught you. However, because we know you're one of us, we know, you'll go do this for us. So he takes him, so he arrives in Switzerland. He's taken by a driver who tells him, a little bit of the story about the bad blood because they got something thrown at, like a beer or something was thrown at the car. And he explains to him a little about the bad blood between the locals and the people on the hill. And the guy asks him, what's all that about? He gives him a little bit of the story about 200 years ago. There was a baron and his wife, and there was all kind of incestuous talk, and people would disappear. The peasants would disappear from the land and things like that. So he missed visiting hours when he got there, so he had to go back to a hotel and to come back later. Now, on the way out, back down the hill, they have a really horrid wreck where Lockhart then wakes up in the facility with his leg broke from the thigh down. So he's in a cast. Now, he finds out that he has woken up 3 days later. They assure him that they contacted his employer and told them, what was going on. So there's, of course, lots of weird imagery. He notices what looks like a larva in the water that he was drinking, like a little tiny, barely on the top of your pinky larva, like a tadpole, That kind of freaks him out, and he has also noticed that, all the activities, everything, pool, steam, water, everything revolves around water. So he's kind of noticing that. And he does end up tricking a nurse into telling him where Pembroke is. That's the CEO he came to see. And he does manage to find him and speak to him. There's a lot of nudity in that scene, but it's not really going to be of interest to you unless you like seeing 90-year-old women and 80-year-old men's privates, you're not going to. It was definitely not a pleasing bit of nudity. Well, it wasn't a bit of nudity. There was a lot of nudity. I'm sorry, I'm just not into geriatrics. But they talk, and we learn a little bit more about Lockhart. We learn that his dad committed suicide right in front of him by jumping off a bridge during a stock market crash. So why you would want to become a stock market big business person after you've seen what it did to your dad, I don't know, but that's a different subject. So the director of this facility is named Vollmer. So he ends up being told by Vollmer that he is going to stay because he does convince Pembroke to come home with him. And he tells Vollmer this. And while he's waiting for Pembroke to come out, he meets Hannah, this girl played by Mia Goth. So he meets this weird girl, Hannah. She gives him a little backstory, you know. She's been here all her life, and you know, her parents died when she was a kid, stuff like that. So that's when Vollmer informs him that Pembroke is not leaving. He gets angry about that, and then gets very sick and passes out. So when he comes to, Vollmer, you know, explains a little about the girl that he met, Hannah, that, you know, he's always been trying to heal her from her trauma, and that she's like a daughter to him. And he convinces, he gaslights. There's a lot of gaslighting in this movie. Like in most in the medical field, a whole lot of it is gaslighting you. He manages to gaslight Lockhart into believing that he really is sick, and agrees to go through some of the treatments, such as the deprivation tank, where we are introduced to the ills. That's the other thing. Water and ills. You know. So that was a very disturbing scene, the sensory deprivation tank. I mean, if you thought the one in Altered States was bad, no. This is the worst one. So he almost drowns when he's in there. He thinks he sees someone. That later on, he thinks he sees someone taking a body into this outer building. Looks kind of like a gazebo temple-like thing. So he thinks he sees somebody out there, and he ends up talking to another old lady that's there, another client, Miss Watkins, who tells him more about the legend of the Baron. That, you know, that she had read stuff about the Baron doing experiments on his peasants, and warns him about a darkness, to beware of the darkness here. He talks to Hannah again and gets her to ride with him to town because he wants to call back to his, you know, his office. Now, while they're there, he has also stolen a little bit. Everybody seems to take, whether they have it around their neck, they've always got a little blue bottle of some kind of extract on them. And even Hannah takes it. So he had managed to steal a little bottle of it, and when they went into town, he left her at this little pub while he went. The bartender had told him that there wasn't a doctor, but that there was a vet, and so he goes and sees the vet, just wants some kind of medical opinion about what this could be, and he leaves her alone at that pub. Now, she's never been anywhere but that place. So the doctor then sorts of tells him even more about this Baron history, because he had stolen Pembroke's file as well. So that's what he wanted to show him, was that stuff and his CEO's file. Now, while he's there, you know, the vet looks at it and all, says, well, I'm only a vet, but I can tell you that this man is dying of dehydration. And that freaks him out because that's all these people do is drink water, right? But he's definitely dying of dehydration, teeth falling out, all the symptoms of dehydration. He also then tells him even more about the Baron, and that is that, yes, peasants were disappearing. That's the legend, that he was trying to cure his wife's inability to carry children, her miscarriages and things like that, and that he had been experimenting on the peasants. And so he ends up calling the corporation. Turns out they had never been told anything about this. They wondered where the fuck he was. So he tells them that some shit's going on, obviously, because they told me that they called you and let you know where I was and what had happened. So they were like, you get him and you get your ass back here now, because this merger is going to fall through. This whole company's going to go down the drain. So before he can really do anything, he goes back, gets into a big fight with a bunch of people there at the pub, and Volmer shows up, takes Hannah. And unfortunately for him, the little visitor sheet thing that he had signed in, he had actually signed his ass in as a patient, not knowing that. So when he tries to tell the cops, they just make him look like, that he's crazy. So he goes back. His hallucinations get worse. There's a lot of hallucination stuff in this movie. And he manages to find where Pembroke is at. Pembroke has gotten a lot worse. Finds him in the transfusion department, where they're in these big barometric pressure type things. And you can see little drops coming into those little purple bottles, little blue bottles. From the bottom of it, it's like something's being drained from him. So Volmer ends up catching him. They torture him, ripping out one of his teeth. He manages to get out, and because a new client was arriving, the same driver from before, he jumps in the back seat and tells him to get him the fuck out of here. He manages to go back to the police in town to tell them that some deep shit is going on at this place. Volmer shows up again, this time not only with papers, but with Pembroke, to prove that he was still alive, because, he thought he was dead. Gaslights the hell out of him in front of the cop, and is actually forcibly returned to Volmer, who takes him back to the facility. Now that he's realized the cops were in on it, and they come for him and they take him back, he realizes that he's now a virtual prisoner there. And he ends up falling for the gaslighting and begins to doing the treatments and becomes like everyone else, which is basically very calm zombies. Now, the one thing you do notice about all of this, though, is that it's only the staff that are taking those little drops of extract out of the bottle. None of the patients, just the staff. And Volmer himself and Hannah. So that's your clue right there, that there is a difference between these two groups of people. So he finally rebels and finds out that his leg isn't broke. He rips off the cast. It was never broke. So he's been fucked from the beginning. And he ends up breaking into the outbuilding, and he goes down where he finds like a Phantom of the Opera type lair with a bed and all these weird things and weird looking bowls of skin, it looks like, and a big aquifer pool, things like that. And while he's in there, that orderly that he had seen that night comes in, and he watches him put a dead body, dehydrated, shriveled up, dead body, into that pool where all these eels eat it. So they end up getting into a gigantic fight when they're doing that, and he ends up killing that orderly. So he runs back to the spa where subsequently or simultaneously Hannah was in a pool and had her first period. So like blood went everywhere. So basically Hannah and Lockhart confront Volmer at dinner in front of like all of the clients at the same time. She wanting to know what the fuck this is. You know, it's like a Carrie moment from the bathroom scene in Carrie. And Lockhart wants to know what that shit out there is up about. So he tries to, tell him. But the guests all get up like zombies and help him subdue Lockhart. He's then placed next to Pembroke in that transfusion place in a horrific scene where Volmer pretty much explains everything. And that is that the water that they are drinking is from these eels, this particular aquifer. The water is very, very poisonous to humans. It dehydrates you over time instead of hydrating you. However, once your body is saturated with it, they then put those eels in you. And the eels can metabolize this stuff. And that causes that extract. So they basically suck the extract out of people until they're shriveled and dead, and then they dispose of them by feeding them to the eels. So we then see afterwards, we see Hannah come up to Lockhart, who seems to be one of the zombies now. Very pacified. Why would anyone want to leave here? Things like that. And later that night, we are shown what appears to be a wedding ceremony. Everything looks very cultish, very ritualistic. Looks like something out of Midsommar. And we see her taken by Volmar down into that place, in that outbuilding, down into that lab, where she is promptly. She's very confused. She doesn't understand what's going on. And he reveals the truth to her. And that is that he is actually her father. And that she has basically been alive as long as he has. And that she, because she had her period, is finally ready to carry on the bloodline, that incestuous bloodline that they talked about. It's a very, very ugly scene and very disturbing to hear. So that was his sister. The Baroness was his sister. She is the product of one of the only successful mating between them two. So all of this experimentation that had been going on for now over 200 years, because this is the Baron. So all of this experimentation that had been going on before the locals revolted and burned the place down, was him trying to get his sisters to stop miscarrying. The locals, though, got tired of their population being murdered. They burnt down his place where this spa was built on. They burnt down his place, ripped the fetus out of her, but she was so close to delivering that not only did the Baron survive, but the baby survived. And through the use of this extract, which is basically like an immortality syndrome, serum. So God only knows how long the staff has been alive, but he has been alive over 200 years. And so has Hannah. So Mia Goth's character, Hannah, is very, very slowly aging. So obviously it doesn't like freeze your time, but what is that? She was a baby and finally became what, 16 or something? So it took her over 200 years to reach the age of menstruation. Maybe delayed a little. But, so she's about 16. So it's taken over 200 years for her to become 16. Is basically it. So the Baron is still all burnt up from the fire. So all that skin stuff that Lockhart had seen, that's the fake skin that he wears so people won't recognize him. So it's a mask. A real Ed Gein kind of mask. Only this one looks like a normal person. So Lockhart shows up, though, while he's trying to assault his own daughter. And that's an ugly scene. And, of course, you have the boss fight between Volmer and Lockhart, who manages to set him on fire, but that don't stop him. He almost kills Lockhart, like over the eel pool, the aquifer. But then Hannah gets loose, and she comes up behind him before he can kill him, and calls her dad. And he stands up and turns around, and then she puts a shovel right through his head. So he's standing there with the shovel like all the way down to like here. And he was quite surprised at that behavior. Now, of course, the whole place is on fire again. And now it's caught the spa on fire as well. So all the clients are running. Everything is running. It's going. And the Baron falls into the pool and is eaten by his own eels. They manage to get up out of there. And him and her escape. And most of the clients are too, but they're just walking around like zombies. Like automatons. So they decide, shit's done and over with, let's leave. So they get on the bike and they're going down there when they literally run into that driver who is coming up the hill. And it turns out that the three executives from the very beginning of the movie, they've come to do it themselves to get him and Pembroke. He tells them that Pembroke is gone. Pembroke is dead. They, of course, see the whole place on fire. The whole hill's on fire. They don't really know what's going on. But they do kind of hint that, well, if he's dead, we can blame everything on him. Get your ass in the car. And he refuses. I mean, obviously, I think he's learned some lessons about life, yeah. So he refuses, and they're shocked that he's refusing their obvious offer. Because they were going to blame him, but now that Pembroke's dead, they can blame him, and everything will be fine. Now everything's cool. So come on back and be one of us. He, of course, refuses, and him and Hannah go off into town, and the movie ends. And that is a cure for wellness. I love this movie because it's one of those long, it's like two and a half hours long. Um, I love the atmosphere of this movie. A lot of people were confused about the ending. They didn't quite understand it. It was preposterous, and it's like, what's preposterous about it? It's a Fountain of Youth story where the Fountain of Youth happens to be owned by a psycho. You know, I mean, I love the blues in this movie too. The midnight blues. Everything is blue in this movie. Water, yeah, cure for wellness, you know. Cure for wellness. So, yeah, I love the cinematography of this movie. I love the quietness of this movie. This movie is like quiet in a terrifying way. Everything is very unnerving and unsettling in the cinematography in this movie. It's sort of like that saying, if it seems too good to be true, it probably is. I think the same thing can be said about beauty. If something seems so beautiful, there's probably some shit underneath it. And that's what this was. You know, this place was an ideal paradise. There was actually a horrific, murderous place run by a psycho who was just like killing his clientele and had been murdering people for hundreds of years. And yet it was the most beautifully pristine place. So yeah, it's kind of like that. If it's too beautiful, there's probably some ugliness underneath. And like I said, I love the cast. Mia Goth was great, great in this. So it was like, you could definitely, if you go back and see this, this is one of her first movies. You can see that she's got what it takes to have become what she became. You know, with X and Pearl and Infinity Pool and all that. So you can definitely see how powerful she is as an actress in this. And of course, you know, him, Lockhart, he is absolutely stunning to me. And big crush there. So yeah, that was A Cure for Wellness. Love this movie. Gave it an 8.5. I will see you in the next one that I do. Love you, miss you, bye-bye. Always remember, never forget, you're a very, very special person. Don't let anyone ever tell you different. Cure for Wellness, 2016. That was that horrific tank scene. And I will see you in the next one. Bye-bye.